On a New York street, a homeless black man helps a crying child. The child's millionaire father watches. An act of kindness from a man with nothing is about to shatter the world of a man who has everything. Blood ran down the girl's knee as her sobs echoed on the empty sidewalk. No one stopped. No one looked. To the hurried passers-by in New York, a crying child was just another noise in the chaotic symphony of the city. But for Leo, a homeless black man, even with hunger gnawing at his stomach for 2 days, that cry pierced through all his defenses. "Hey, little one, let me see that." Leo approached the girl, ignoring the suspicious glances of pedestrians. His dark, calloused fingers contrasted with the girl's pale skin as he gently examined the bruise. With precise movements, he took a surprisingly clean handkerchief from his pocket, his only possession besides the clothes he wore, and pressed it against the wound. A few feet away, Richard Montgomery watched the scene motionless, his hand instinctively clenching the $5,000 Italian leather briefcase. His daughter had run ahead, tripped, and now a homeless man was touching her. His first impulse was to intervene, but something stopped him. Perhaps the delicacy of the man's movements, or the way his daughter had stopped crying. Almost instantly, "What happened, sweetie?" Leo asked, tying the girl's loose shoelace. "Looks like you were in a hurry." "I just wanted to see the birds," she replied, pointing to the pigeons fighting over crumbs. "My name is Lily." Leo smiled, revealing a surprisingly perfect smile for someone who slept in crowded shelters when he was lucky, or under overpasses when he wasn't. "There you go," said Leo, finishing cleaning her knee. "It's nothing serious. Just be more careful, okay? Those sneakers are too nice to get scratched." That's when Lily innocently asked, "Why are you so dirty?" The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Richard felt his face burn with shame, ready to intervene, but Leo's response surprised him. "Because not everyone is as lucky in life, little one." He spoke without self-pity, just stating a fact. Sometimes we lose our home, our job, our family, but we never lose our humanity. Remember that. Those words hit Richard like a punch. Just 32 days ago, during a board meeting, he had said that people on the streets chose to be there, and that giving handouts only perpetuates the problem. Now he was watching a man who clearly had nothing share his only clean possession with a stranger. Leo stood up quickly, wiping his face to hide a stubborn tear. His stomach growled loud enough for Lily to hear, reminding him that he had traded his last meal from the shelter for that clean handkerchief after hearing that an infection had spread among the homeless in the area. That Lily finally spotted Richard and ran toward him. "Look, that man helped me." Richard stepped forward, awkward in his normally confident stance. Leo was already backing away, quickly, as if he knew the usual reaction to his presence. "Wait," Richard called, but he had already disappeared into the crowd. Lily tugged at his father's coat sleeve. He was hungry. "Dad, I heard his stomach growling." That night, as rain pounded the streets of Manhattan, Leo huddled under the small awning of a service entrance, dreaming of what his life could have been if that job interview 3 years ago hadn't ended with a human resources director saying that his profile didn't fit the company's image. The same director who, coincidentally, now appeared on billboards as the new VP of diversity at Montgomery Enterprises. What he didn't know was that, at that very moment, Richard Montgomery was using all his power and resources to find him, driven by something he hadn't felt in years: shame for who he had become and determination to change it. If this story of kindness and indifference touched your heart, be sure to sign up to find out how a simple act of humanity would spark a revolution that no one, not even the most powerful man in New York, could have predicted. 3 days passed as Leo faced a new blow. The shelter where he occasionally got a bed had been closed for emergency renovations, a common euphemism when authorities wanted to remove homeless people from high-value areas before important events. You have 20 minutes to get your belongings, announced a police officer with feigned indifference. But where are we supposed to go? Asked an elderly woman standing next to Leo. That's not my problem, he replied, checking his watch. The nearest shelter is 10 kilometers away. Leo gathered his meager possessions, a backpack with 2 changes of clothes, a worn toothbrush, tattered diary, and a cheap makeup kit he used for job interviews that never led to work. That's when Marcus, a social worker who frequented the shelter, tapped him on the shoulder. Leo, the Fresh Start Foundation is hiring people with experience living on the streets for a new program. Pays. He handed him a card with an address on. Why me? He asked skeptically. Because you have something that can't be taught. Dignity under pressure, he replied. Besides, I saw your resume when you applied for the housing program. Bachelor's degree in business. 3 years of HR experience before all this. The next morning, soaked by persistent rain, Leo showed up at the address he had been given. The receptionist didn't even look up when he entered, dripping onto the freshly waxed floor. Can I help you? She asked coldly. I'm here about the job with the Restart Foundation. Marcus Williams referred me. The receptionist's expression instantly changed to contempt. Are you sure you're in the right place? The female voice interjected. He's exactly where he should be. Vanessa Amarachun, the foundation's executive director, appeared with a confident posture and an impeccable blazer, extending her hand without hesitation. In her simple office, without the ostentation typical of NGOs that spent more on appearances than on results, Amara explained, our mission is more than just getting people off the streets. It's to expose the system that puts them there in the first place. The conversation was interrupted by Marcus' arrival with a thick folder. Was finishing up my research on Montgomery Enterprises. The name struck Leo like a bolt of lightning. Montgomery. Richard Montgomery. Amara confirmed. Billionaire, self-proclaimed philanthropist, and ironically one of the biggest investors in urban revitalization projects that drive vulnerable communities out of their homes. Our next campaign will focus on the inconsistencies between his public image and his corporate policies. Fate had a peculiar sense of humor. The father of the girl he had helped days ago. Why are you telling me this? Leo asked. Because we need someone who knows the reality of the streets but also understands the corporate world. Someone who can expose the hypocrisy. What Leo didn't reveal was his brief encounter with Montgomery's daughter. Something told him to keep that information to himself. In the weeks that followed, as he collected testimonials from people displaced by Montgomery Enterprises projects, Leo noticed something strange. The same black car often appeared wherever he went. More than once he felt like he was being watched. In his luxurious apartment, Richard examined reports on the foundation, discovering with growing discomfort that his corporate policies were directly on the organization's radar. Lily, playing in the next room, kept asking about the man with the handkerchief. Did you find him, Daddy? Not yet, sweetie, but I'm getting close. During his research, Leo found a familiar name in the records. James Peterson, current Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Montgomery Enterprises. The same man who, 3 years earlier, had rejected his application with the excuse that he didn't fit the corporate culture. The same man who, according to current employees, systematically vetoed minority candidates for leadership positions while building a facade of inclusivity. His tattered journal wasn't just a venting ground. It was a meticulous record of a broken system, seen through the eyes of someone who had experienced it in its rawest form. Names, dates, subtly coded, discriminatory comments he had received in dozens of job interviews. And now, with the Foundation's resources, these observations were beginning to take shape as concrete evidence. What no one realized as Leo and Richard's paths inevitably converged was how a simple, worn backpack carried the seeds that could bring down an empire. While he searched for him, driven by a belated conscience, he quietly compiled the dossier that would expose the fundamental contradictions of a system he had helped build. Sometimes the most dangerous people aren't those with power. They're those with nothing left to lose. Montgomery Enterprises' annual Diversity and Inclusion Conference was the most hypocritical event in the corporate world, according to Leo, in that luxurious auditorium under soft lights and inspiring banners proclaiming innovation through diversity. Hundreds of executives applauded as James Peterson took the stage. As director of diversity, I am pleased to announce that our company has increased the hiring of professionals from minority groups by 75% in the last year, he proclaimed, displaying flawless graphics on the big screen. In the back row, Leo discreetly recorded everything with a small device provided by the Ramico Foundation. His presence there as a representative of a partner NGO had been carefully orchestrated by Amara after weeks of meticulous preparation. Richard Montgomery watched the event from the right side of the stage, uncomfortable. Since meeting Lily, something in him had changed. His investigations into Leo had led him to discover not only about his quest but also about the questionable practices of his own company. Now, Peterson continued, I am proud to invite representatives from our partner organizations to a panel on social inclusion. Leo took a deep breath and walked toward the stage along with 3 other representatives. When Peterson saw him, his smile faltered for a second, so brief that only someone looking for that reaction would have noticed. Welcome, he said, controlling his voice. We'll start with a brief introduction from each organization. When it was Leo's turn, he stood up calmly. My name is Leo Williams. 3 years ago, I had an interview at this company for the HR department. An uncomfortable silence settled. This wasn't the agreed-upon script. At the time, Mr. Peterson informed me that my profile didn't fit the company image. His voice remained steady. 3 months later, I lost my apartment. 6 months later, I was on the streets. Peterson coughed nervously. Think we're getting off topic. On the streets, Leo continued as if uninterrupted. I kept a detailed journal of every person in a situation similar to mine. Former skilled professionals, mostly Black and Latino, rejected for not fitting in with corporate cultures. Richard Montgomery sat up straight in his chair, finally recognizing who this man was. The same man who had helped Lily. The same man he had been looking for weeks. While Montgomery Enterprises proclaims inclusion, Leo continued, pressing a button on his cell phone. Its executives speak a different language in private. On the big screen, a video appeared. James Peterson at an internal meeting laughing as he said, "Sure, we need diversity in our promotional brochures, but not necessarily in the boardroom." Another clip showed the same man commenting, "Put some color in the lower levels to meet quotas but keep the strategic core." The murmurs in the auditorium grew louder. Peterson turned pale. That's edited completely. Out of context. I have the full recordings, Leo replied calmly, as well as documents showing how under his leadership 89% of qualified black candidates were rejected with the same vague justification used on me. The screen now displayed a series of internal emails, messages, and evaluation forms with clear patterns of discrimination. Richard stood up and walked toward the stage with determined steps. Peterson, sweating, looked frantically between Leo and his boss. Mr. Montgomery, this is clearly an attempt to silence. Richard interrupted, his voice echoing through the microphone. For a moment Leo feared he was there to defend him. Instead he turned to the audience. As CEO of Montgomery Enterprises, I take full responsibility for these failures. Not just policy failures, but moral failures. The entire auditorium froze. Richard Montgomery never admitted mistakes publicly. Mr. Williams, he continued, looking directly at Leo, you have shown us today the true meaning of courage and integrity, qualities that, ironically, we claim to value in this company. Peterson tried to slip away discreetly, but Richard held him back by the arm. James Peterson is officially relieved of his duties, effective immediately, and tomorrow we will begin a full audit of all our hiring and promotion practices. Turning to Leo, he said more quietly, and I have a personal debt to you that I'd like to discuss in private. Backstage after the conference descended into chaos, Richard found Leo organizing his notes. Lily asks about you every day, he said simply. He looked at him surprised. How did you? My daughter insists that you're the handkerchief man, the handkerchief you used to wipe her bruise. I've been looking for you for weeks. As Montgomery's corporate empire underwent an earthquake of change in the weeks that followed, with high-profile layoffs and complete restructurings, few realized the true irony of the situation. The man who had built his empire preaching meritocracy finally understood that true merit came not from accumulated privilege, but from resilience forged in adversity. What no one could have predicted was how that confrontation would transform not only Leo's life or the policies of Montgomery Enterprises, but fundamentally the heart of a man who for the first time saw clearly the world beyond his bubble of privilege. And as the consequences of this public revelation spread like ripples across the corporate world, one question remained. What would happen when the girl Lily discovered that her hero and the handkerchief man had much more in common than anyone could have imagined? 6 months after the conference that rocked the corporate world, Forbes magazine published a story titled The Montgomery Transformation: How a Homeless Man Revolutionized an Empire. The cover story featured Leo Williams, now Director of Social Impact at Montgomery Enterprises, alongside Richard Montgomery at a housing project developed by the company. The first time I saw Leo, he was helping my daughter, while I stood by paralyzed, Richard said in the interview. At that moment, he was invisible to the corporate world I represented. Today, he is the most important voice at our decision-making table. Montgomery's new job training center, located exactly where the shelter had been closed for renovations, now offered temporary housing, training, and guaranteed employment for people in vulnerable situations. The program, named Project Handkerchief at Lily's suggestion, had already reintegrated more than 200 people into the workforce. Meanwhile, James Peterson faced a lawsuit filed by former employees and discriminated job applicants. His career was effectively over. No reputable company would risk hiring him after revelations of systematic discriminatory conduct, in an irony not lost on social media he was now looking for work using the same system he had manipulated against others for years. Prejudice has a cost that goes far beyond morale, Leo explained in a TED Talk that would go viral. When companies reject talent based on appearance, race, or background, they don't just destroy individual lives, they compromise their own potential for innovation and growth. The partnership between the Ramaco Foundation and Montgomery Enterprises became a model studied in business schools. Amara Chun, now a regular advisor to the company's board of directors, often joked they tried to buy us to silence us. We ended up buying their soul, and it was worth a lot more than we realized. One fall afternoon, while overseeing the opening of a new community space, Leo received an unexpected message. A woman who had recently been welcomed into the program wrote, "You don't know me, but 3 years ago you gave me the last piece of your sandwich at a shelter. You said I needed it more than you did. I never forgot. Today I'm next in line to start over." The chain of kindness Leo had started, even in his most difficult moments, was now multiplying through lives he had never imagined touching. A home, yes, he now had a home of his own. Leo kept framed the small handkerchief he had used to wipe Lily's knee, now washed and stored as a symbol of a transformation impossible to predict. Lily, now with self-assigned responsibilities in Project Handkerchief, often accompanied Leo on his visits to the centers. "When I grow up," she confided to him one day, "want to help people like you do." "You already do," Leo replied. "Do you know how?" She asked, curious. "By seeing people that others pretend not to see." Richard, watching from afar as his daughter interacted with the man who had completely redefined his values, reflected on how a single moment of indecision, those seconds he had hesitated before intervening when Leo helped Lily, had changed the course of countless lives, including his own. "There's a lesson I learned from all this," Richard shared during a charity dinner that raised millions for social housing. "Privilege isn't just what you have, but what you've never had to think about. I spent decades building walls to protect my fortune when I should have been building bridges to share opportunities." The real transformation, however, was in the small details. Richard now knew the names of every maintenance worker. Lily shared her lunch with less fortunate colleagues, and Leo now carried not just a journal of injustices, but a strategic plan to systematically correct them. "Some people ask me if I feel satisfied that I won," Leo said during an interview. "But this was never a battle to win or lose. It was about restoring balance. The real victory isn't in defeating your opponents, but in turning them into allies." The story of a man who went from the sidewalk to the boardroom resonated far beyond the borders of New York. In schools, businesses, and communities, the Leo effect inspired a new approach to diversity, not as a statistical obligation, but as a strategic advantage and moral imperative. On his 1-year anniversary with the company, Leo received an unusual gift from Richard and Lily, a small box containing a new, immaculately white handkerchief with a simple note for the next new beginning. His eyes filled with tears as he realized the depth of the gesture. It wasn't just a symbol of how his life had changed. It was a reminder that genuine transformation always begins with simple acts of humanity, even when the whole world seems to have turned its back on you. That night, gazing at the city that had once rejected him and now celebrated him, Leo understood that true justice isn't about punishing those who make mistakes, but about creating a world where those mistakes become increasingly difficult to make and increasingly easy to correct. And as the lights of Manhattan sparkled against the night, sky, a simple truth hung in the air. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is not to tear down empires, but to transform them from the inside out with the same kindness with which you clean a stranger's scraped knee. If the story touched your heart and made you reflect on the transformative power of small gestures, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that reveal how true greatness often hides in the most unlikely corners of society, and how the best revenge against an unjust system is to rebuild it with your own values.